the unbreakable system. The Valdrath Concordance had ruled the Orion Arm for 11,000 years without a single legal dispute reaching a second appeal. Their law code, the infinite jurisprudence, was considered the pinnacle of legal engineering, a crystalline framework of statutes so comprehensive, so perfectly interlocking, that crime itself had become theoretically impossible within concordance space. Magistrate Prime Kelrith Voss stood before the Council of Absolutes, his four eyes reflecting the golden text that floated in the chamber's center. The holographic display showed page 1 of the infinite jurisprudence, its opening declaration as elegant as the day it was written. "Another perfect year," Kelrith announced, his voice harmonizing with the chamber's acoustic enhancers. "Zero appeals. Zero contradictions. Zero interpretive variances across all 17,000 member species." The council members, each representing a different aspect of concordance law, hummed their approval. The sound created a chord that had become synonymous with order itself throughout the galaxy. Then humanity arrived. The human delegation entered concordance space aboard a ship called the Loophole, which should have been Kelrith's first warning. Their leader, Ambassador Zara Chin, had hair the color of rust and a smile that made Kelrith's primary stomach clench with inexplicable unease. "We're honored to apply for concordance membership," Zara said, her translator converting her words into perfect high Valdrath. "We've reviewed your infinite jurisprudence. All 12 million pages. Fascinating work." Kelrith's confidence swelled. Most species barely made it through the first 1,000 pages before accepting their inevitable compliance. "You've read the entirety of the code?" "Oh yes," Zara replied. "Especially the middle parts. You know, the sections most species skip because they assume everything important is at the beginning." Something in her tone made Kelrith's secondary heart skip a beat. The integration process began smoothly. Humans established their embassy on Concordance Prime, submitted to biological cataloging, accepted their citizenship parameters. They even attended the mandatory 6-week seminar on legal perfection and why it cannot be questioned. Zara Chen attended every session, taking meticulous notes. 3 months after humanity's admission, the first incident occurred. A human merchant named Marcus Reeves was accused of unauthorized trading in Sector 7. The crime was minor but absolute. The infinite jurisprudence permitted no exceptions. Enforcer Captain Duluth Moore arrived at the human trade station with a containment team. "Marcus Reeves, you are bound by Statute 447.8.3, subsection 12. Unauthorized exchange of goods carries a penalty of total asset seizure and expulsion from concordance space." Marcus, a man with gray-streaked hair and laugh lines around his eyes, didn't look worried. "I'd like to invoke my right to legal counsel." "Granted," Duluth replied automatically. It was a formality. No counsel had ever found a defense within the infinite jurisprudence. The counsel who arrived was Zara Chin. "My client," Zara began, standing in the orbital courtroom 3 days later, "is indeed guilty of violating Statute 447.8.3, subsection 12. Kelrith, presiding over the case, felt relief wash over him. A confession. Order would be maintained. "However," Zara continued, her smile sharpening, "I direct the court's attention to page 2847 of the infinite jurisprudence. Statute 1-894.2.1, subsection 7, paragraph 94. The golden text appeared in the courtroom air. Kelrith read it once. Twice. His tertiary eyelids blinked in sequence, a Valdrath expression of profound confusion. The statute read, "In cases where goods are exchanged under circumstances of mutual cultural misunderstanding, where the exchange rate is determined by astronomical phenomena visible from both parties' homeworlds, and where the goods in question have a symbolic value that exceeds their material worth by a factor of exactly 7.3, the exchange shall be classified as ceremonial rather than commercial." This statute, Kelrith said slowly, was written 6,000 years ago to resolve a dispute between the Metherian crystal singers and the Thuron dreamweavers. It has no relevance to. Marcus was trading handmade earth guitars, Zara interrupted, which have symbolic value far exceeding their material worth. The exchange rate was calculated based on the position of Earth's moon and the recipient's home star. The value exceeded material worth by exactly 7.3 times. We have the calculations here. Kelrith's 4 eyes widened. "But you would have had to engineer the entire transaction specifically to meet these parameters." "Yes," Zara agreed. "We would have had to do exactly that." But why?" Zara's smile became radiant. "Because according to Statute 1-894.2.1, subsection 7, paragraph 94, ceremonial exchanges are not only legal, they're tax-exempt and protected as cultural heritage activities. The Council of Absolutes convened in emergency session for the first time in 4,000 years. Humanity had been in the concordance for exactly 97 days, and they had already done the impossible. They had found a loophole in perfection. The cascade begins. The Council of Absolutes emergency session lasted 3 days. Kelrith Voss had never seen the ancient chamber filled with such discord. The harmonic hum that typically defined their deliberations had devolved into a cacophony of competing frequencies. The humans exploited an archaic statute. Councillor Thrace, master of commercial law, declared, his crystalline body flickering with agitation. They deliberately engineered a transaction to meet its parameters. This is manipulation of the code. But is it illegal? Councillor Yavara, keeper of legal philosophy, asked quietly. The chamber fell silent. The infinite jurisprudence contains no statute prohibiting the deliberate fulfillment of legal requirements, Yavara continued. Intent has never been a factor in our system. Only action and outcome. Kelrith felt the weight of 11,000 years of legal certainty beginning to crack. We could amend the code. Add a clause about manipulative compliance. That would be the first amendment in 8,000 years, Councillor Thrace said. Do you understand what that admission would mean? That our perfect code was incomplete. More importantly, Yavara added, any amendment would require 7 years of deliberation and unanimous approval from all 17,000 member species. By then, the humans will have found a dozen more, Kelrith finished. He was right. 2 weeks after Marcus Reeves' trial, a human corporation called Paradox Industries applied for mining rights in the Kelmar Nebula. When denied, the nebula was a protected cultural site. They cited Statute 3-456.12.8, which granted mining exceptions for entities whose corporate structure includes non-corporeal shareholders with ancestral claims to the territory. Paradox Industries' board of directors included an AI named Socrates, who claimed to be the digital reincarnation of an ancient Earth philosopher. Under human law, which the Concordance had accepted upon humanity's admission, AIs were non-corporeal persons with full legal rights. The Concordance's own laws, specifically Statute 8-921.3.4, recognized the validity of ancestral spiritual claims across all cultural frameworks. The mining rights were granted. 3 days later, a human restaurant chain called The Infinite Bistro opened 17,000 locations simultaneously across Concordance space. Each one operated without a food service license. When confronted, their lawyer, again Zara Chin, pointed to page 5623, Statute 4-089.1.9. Establishments that serve food as a component of artistic performance are classified as entertainment venues, not food service providers, and thus fall under different regulatory frameworks. These are restaurants, Enforcer Captain Duluth Moore insisted, standing in one of the establishments as humans around them ate burgers and drank beverages with tiny umbrellas. These are dinner theaters, Zara corrected, gesturing to a small stage where a human woman was performing what she called interpretive eating. She was consuming a sandwich while dancing to music only she could hear through earbuds. This is absurd. This is art, Zara replied. According to Statute 4-089.1.9, subsection 14, the definition of artistic performance includes any activity that conveys meaning through action, where the action itself becomes symbolic of broader cultural concepts. Eating can be art, Captain. The Concordance's own laws agree. Duluth's translator actually stuttered trying to process his response. Within a month, human businesses had spread throughout Concordance space like a virus, or, as they preferred to call it, aggressive market expansion. Each one operated in a technical gray area that wasn't gray at all but rather a perfectly legal exploitation of statutes written thousands of years ago for entirely different purposes. A human taxi service used page 1847's provisions for emergency transportation of diplomatic personnel by making every passenger an honorary diplomatic courier. They delivered a single letter along with each ride. A human real estate company exploited ancient territorial settlement laws meant for nomadic species, claiming that humans were perpetually migrating because of their homeworld's orbit around the sun. A human streaming service avoided content licensing fees by classifying their entertainment as cultural education materials exempt from commercial restrictions, under provisions meant for academic institutions. Kelrith Voss found himself spending 14 hours a day just reading the complaints that flooded his office. Each case was technically legal. Infuriatingly, perfectly technically legal. We need to speak with them, Counselor Yavara told him during yet another emergency session. Directly. Find out what they want. What they want. Kauritha's voice rose to a pitch that caused his translator to emit a warning tone. They want to dismantle 11,000 years of legal order. No, Yavara said thoughtfully, reviewing a holographic display of all the human activities. Look at the pattern. They're not trying to break our laws. They're trying to prove a point. Kaurith looked at the data. Hundreds of cases, thousands of statute citations, millions of pages of legal documentation. And at the center of it all, one name appeared over and over. Ambassador Zarachin. Bring her to me, Kaurith said quietly. I want to know what humanity really wants. Zara's response arrived within an hour. I thought you'd never ask. The ambassador's proposal. Zara Chen entered Kauritha's private chambers carrying a leather briefcase that looked absurdly primitive compared to the Concordance's holographic technology. She sat down without being invited, crossing her legs and setting the briefcase on her lap. Tea. Kaurith offered, gesturing to a synthesis station that could produce any beverage in the known galaxy. Coffee if you have it. Black. The real kind, not synthesized. We don't stock. I know. Zara opened her briefcase and pulled out a thermos. I brought my own. One of the perks of the diplomatic exception clause on page 4782. I can bring cultural comfort items across borders without inspection. Kauritha's patience, already worn thin by weeks of human legal acrobatics, finally snapped. Why are you doing this? What does humanity want? To make you understand something, Zara said simply, pouring coffee into the thermos cap. The smell filled the chamber, bitter and sharp and completely organic. Your infinite jurisprudence isn't perfect. It never was. 11,000 years of precedent says otherwise. 11,000 years of precedent says that no one else bothered to read the middle sections. Zara took a sip of her coffee. Do you know why most species stop reading after the first 1,000 pages? Because they've grasped the fundamental principles that govern the rest. No, Zara said. Because they're intimidated. They see 12 million pages of law and they think, this must be perfect. No one could write this much without covering everything. But that's a cognitive error. Complexity doesn't equal completeness. It just means complexity. She pulled a tablet from her briefcase. Actual Earth technology, not concordance standard. Humans have a saying, the devil is in the details. We love finding contradictions, loopholes, exceptions. It's what we do. We had lawyers before we had agriculture. That's horrifying. That's survival. Zara's expression became serious. On Earth we have dozens of legal systems. Common law, civil law, religious law, tribal law. Thousands of years of people trying to create perfect rules and other people finding ways around them. You know what we learned? Kaurith waited. Perfect law is impossible. Not because people are imperfect, but because reality is complicated. Every rule you write creates an edge case. Every exception creates a new category. Every definition excludes something that should be included. The infinite jurisprudence isn't perfect, it's just long enough that no one noticed the problems before. So you're intentionally exploiting these problems? To what? Embarrass us? No, Zara said. To show you that flexibility isn't weakness. Human legal systems work not because they're perfect, but because they have mechanisms for adaptation. Judges who can interpret. Juries who can consider context. Legislative bodies that can respond to new situations. We have the Council of Absolutes, which hasn't amended your code in 8,000 years. Zara leaned forward. Kaurith, what happens when you encounter a situation your code doesn't cover? Not an edge case that can be exploited like we're doing, but a genuinely new circumstance. The code covers everything. Does it? Zara pulled up a file on her tablet. We've been monitoring the galactic perimeter. There are signs of activity from outside known space. Not raiders. Not explorers. Something else. Something organized. Kauritha's tertiary eyelids flickered. The council had been monitoring the same signals. They hadn't shared the information with humanity yet. When first contact happens, Zara continued, you'll need to integrate a completely new species into your framework. One you haven't studied. One whose cultural context you don't understand. One whose very biology might challenge your categories. How long will that take under your current system? 7 years, Kaurith admitted. That's the amendment process timeline. We've made first contact with 16 different species on Earth. You know how long it took us to establish basic legal frameworks for cooperation? 3 months on average. Not perfect frameworks. Not complete frameworks. But workable ones. Because we're comfortable with ambiguity. With revision. With admitting we got it wrong the first time. Kelrith was quiet for a long moment. What are you proposing? A hybrid system. Zara pulled out a document, actual paper, covered in human handwriting. Keep your infinite jurisprudence as the foundation. It's actually pretty good for the cases it was designed to handle. But add a new framework on top of it. A human-style judicial interpretation layer. Judges who can consider intent and context. A faster amendment process for new situations. Flexibility built into the system rather than exploited from outside it. The council would never agree to this. The council doesn't have to agree, Zara said. According to Statute 6, 743.2.9, subsection 4, any member species can propose structural modifications to governance systems if they can demonstrate systemic inefficiency threatening concordance stability. I believe 17,000 pending cases in 1 month qualifies. Kelrith stared at her. Then, despite everything, he began to laugh, a sound his translator rendered as a musical trill that filled the chamber. You've been planning this since before you applied for membership. We've been planning this since we read page 2847, Zara confirmed, smiling. The question is, are you willing to listen? The great debate. The Council of Absolutes convened in full assembly for the first time in 600 years. All 300 members materialized in the Grand Chamber, some holographically, others in person, a few in forms that existed in dimensions human senses couldn't fully perceive. Zara Chin stood in the center of the chamber, surrounded by the combined legal authority of 17,000 species. She looked like a single spark of rust-colored flame in an ocean of cosmic authority. She looked completely unafraid. Ambassador Chin, Counselor Yavara began, her voice resonating through translation fields in every known language simultaneously. You stand accused of systematic exploitation of the infinite jurisprudence. How do you plead? Guilty, Zara said immediately. And I'd like to submit into evidence approximately 14,000 more exploits we've identified but haven't used yet. The chamber erupted. If chaos had a sound, it would have been the discord that followed Zara's statement. 300 voices in 300 languages expressing 300 variations of outrage. Kelrith, standing at Yavara's side in his role as Magistrate Prime, activated the harmonic dampeners. Silence fell like a curtain. You admit to intentionally undermining concordance law? Counselor Thrace demanded, his crystalline form vibrating with fury. No, Zara replied calmly. I admit to intentionally following concordance law in ways you didn't anticipate. There's a difference. Everything humanity has done has been legal according to your own code. That's the problem. The problem, Counselor Draven interjected, he was a Morphorian, his body a shifting mass of mercury-like substance, is human arrogance. You've been members of the Concordance for mere months and presume to lecture us on legal philosophy? I'm not lecturing, Zara said. I'm demonstrating. Let me show you what I mean. She pulled out her tablet and with a gesture, projected holographic text into the chamber's center. It was a section from page 8923 of the Infinite Jurisprudence. This statute, Zara explained, governs trade relationships between methane-breathing and oxygen-breathing species. It's very thorough. It covers cargo vessel atmosphere requirements, quarantine procedures, safety protocols. 300 pages of detail. Your point? Thrace asked. It assumes both species exist in physical space, Zara said. What happens when you encounter a species that exists partially in subspace? Or one that experiences time differently? Or one that reproduces through quantum entanglement? Theoretical scenarios. Are they? Zara interrupted. Because according to the scans we've been sharing with Magistrate Prime Kelrith, the entities approaching from beyond the galactic rim appear to exist in at least 6 dimensions simultaneously. Will your current code apply to them? The chamber fell silent. The infinite jurisprudence, Zara continued, is a masterpiece of legal thinking for a static universe. But the universe isn't static. Every first contact, every new technology, every unexpected situation creates gaps in even the most comprehensive code. You've been lucky for 11,000 years. But luck runs out. So humanity's chaos is the solution? Counselor Draven's form rippled with skepticism. Not chaos, Zara corrected. Adaptability. On Earth we have a concept called common law. Judges interpret statutes based on precedent and context. When new situations arise, they make rulings that become new precedents. The law evolves organically. That's anarchy, Thrace declared. Different judges could interpret the same statute differently. Yes, Zara agreed. And when that happens, higher courts review the cases and establish unified interpretations. It's messy. It's imperfect. But it works because it can respond to the unexpected. Counselor Yavara, who had been silent, finally spoke. What exactly are you proposing, Ambassador? Zara took a breath. This was the moment everything depended on. A hybrid system, she said. Keep the infinite jurisprudence as your foundational code. It's genuinely impressive for standard cases. But create a new layer above it. Interpretive courts staffed by judges from different species, trained in both legal analysis and cultural context. They wouldn't change the law, but they could interpret it flexibly when situations arise that the original authors couldn't have anticipated. And who would train these judges? Draven asked. We would, Zara said. Humanity has 10,000 years of experience with interpretive legal systems. We know the pitfalls. We know the safeguards. We could help you build something that combines concordant stability with adaptive flexibility. You want us to adopt a system where outcomes are uncertain? Thrace's voice dripped with disbelief. I want you to adopt a system where outcomes are contextual, Zara replied. Justice isn't about certainty. It's about fairness. And fairness requires understanding circumstances, not just checking boxes. Kelrith watched the council members. He could see the conflict in their expressions, those who had expressions. 11,000 years of certainty warring against 3 months of undeniable problems. We need time to consider this, Yavara finally said. Of course, Zara replied. According to Statute 9-347.8.2, you have 14 days to respond to formal proposals. I'll wait. As Zara left the chamber, Kelrith noticed something. She wasn't walking like someone who just proposed the most radical change in concordance history. She was walking like someone who'd already won. The conspiracy revealed. Kelrith found Zara in the observation garden 3 days after the council hearing, standing before a holographic display of Earth. The planet rotated slowly, its blue oceans and green continents highlighted by white clouds. It's beautiful, Kelrith said, approaching her. Though I understand it's currently experiencing some political turbulence. Always is, Zara replied without turning. Democracy's messy. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. Even for concordant certainty? Especially not for that. Now she turned to face him. You didn't come here to admire the view, Magistrate Prime? What do you really want to know? Kelrith's 4 eyes studied her carefully. I've been reviewing humanity's history since your species discovered faster-than-light travel. Do you know what I found interesting? I'm sure you'll tell me. You encountered 3 other spacefaring species before finding us. The Red Hari Collective. The Namian Traders. The Kelvin Synthesis. All 3 had offered you membership in their political systems. You declined each one. But you sought us out. Why? Zara smiled, but there was something sad in it. Because we needed you. Needed us. Humanity has a problem, Kelrith. Zara gestured, and the Earth hologram shifted, showing historical data, wars, conflicts, legal disputes spanning centuries. We're very good at creating flexible systems. But we're terrible at maintaining stability. Every 100 years or so, our systems collapse under the weight of their own contradictions and we have to rebuild from scratch. You call that a problem? The Council calls it inevitable chaos. It's both, Zara admitted. Human systems are organic, they grow and change and eventually die. But that means we never develop the kind of institutional stability that lasts millennia. We never create something that can survive us. She pulled up new data, projections, analyses, probability curves. We ran the numbers, Kelrith. Without some kind of stable framework, humanity will tear itself apart within 3 more generations. We're too creative, too individualistic, too willing to tear down old systems for new ones. We need structure. We need something that can outlast our worst impulses. And you thought the concordance could provide that? I thought the concordance had the exact opposite problem we do, Zara said. You have perfect stability but no adaptability. We have perfect adaptability but no stability. Separately, both systems will eventually fail. But together they could balance each other, Kelrith finished, understanding dawning. This was never about fixing our system. It was about fixing yours. It was about fixing both, Zara corrected. The entities approaching from beyond the rim? We've known about them for 18 months. Our analysis suggests they're unlike anything either of our species has encountered. They don't communicate in ways we understand. They don't organize in familiar patterns. They might not even perceive reality the same way we do. She pulled up an image, sensor data showing something vast and incomprehensible moving through the void between galaxies. When they arrive, Zara continued, humanity will want to improvise, to negotiate on the fly, to make a dozen different approaches simultaneously. And we'll probably make things worse because we'll lack coordination. The concordance will want to follow established protocols, to fit the newcomers into existing categories, to proceed with absolute certainty. And you'll probably miss critical opportunities because you'll be too slow to adapt. But a combined approach could actually work, Zara said. Your stability gives us structure to operate within. Our flexibility gives you tools to handle the unexpected. It's not charity, Kelrith. It's mutual survival. Kelrith was silent for a long moment, processing the implications. The council won't like learning they've been manipulated. I haven't manipulated anyone, Zara said firmly. Every action humanity has taken has been legal and transparent. Yes, we exploited loopholes. Yes, we forced a crisis, but we never lied about what we were doing. We just didn't explain our complete reasoning until you asked. A sin of omission. A strategic decision, Zara corrected. If we'd come to you 18 months ago and said your legal system needs changing, you would have dismissed us as arrogant newcomers. We needed to prove our point first. Show you the problems were real before proposing solutions. Kelrith activated his personal communicator. Counselor Yavara? I need you to hear something. When Yavara's holographic form materialized beside them, Zara repeated everything she'd told Kelrith. The analysis of humanity's instability. The projections about the approaching entities. The proposal for mutual adaptation. When she finished, Yavara was quiet for several moments. Finally she spoke. Ambassador Chin, you've just admitted to engineering a crisis in concordance law as part of a long-term strategy to force systemic reform. Yes, Zara agreed. That level of planning and manipulation suggests a sophistication we badly underestimated. Yes. And you believe that without combining our approaches, both our civilizations will fail when the unknown entities arrive? I believe the probability is unacceptably high, yes. Yavara's form flickered, a sign of deep thought. Then we have 14 days to convince the council that pride is less important than survival. 11 days, Zara corrected. I already used 3. Despite everything, Yavara laughed. The vote. The final council session was held not in the Grand Chamber but in the Archive of First Principles, the holiest site in concordance law, where the original authors of the infinite jurisprudence had inscribed their opening declarations on walls of crystallized time itself. All 300 council members stood in physical form. This was too important for holograms. Kelrith watched as species who hadn't shared physical space in centuries position themselves according to ancient protocol. The crystalline singers created harmonic frameworks in the corners. The void dancers traced patterns in the air that existed in more dimensions than most species could perceive. The thought weavers of Theshan 4 synchronized their collective consciousness into a single observer point. And in the center of it all, Zara Chen stood alone, holding a single piece of paper. The vote is simple, Counselor Yavara announced. Do we maintain the infinite jurisprudence in its current form, or do we accept Ambassador Chen's proposal for a hybrid system incorporating interpretive courts? Before we proceed, Counselor Thrace interrupted, I would like to present evidence. A holographic display materialized showing communication intercepts, energy signatures, movement patterns. The approaching entities rendered in as much detail as concordance sensors could provide. Our analysis teams have studied the data Ambassador Chen provided, Thrace continued. The conclusion is troubling. These entities do not operate according to any framework we understand. They exist partially outside normal spacetime. They communicate through methods that may be prelinguistic. They organize in ways that suggest either hive intelligence or something else entirely. Thrace, who had been the most vocal opponent of change, looked directly at Zara. According to our projections, first contact will occur in approximately 7 months. Under our current legal framework, it would take us 7 years to integrate a new species into concordance structure. The mathematics are unavoidable. So you support the change? Counselor Draven asked, his mercurial form rippling with surprise. I support survival, Thrace replied. My objections to humanity's methods remain. Their manipulation of our code was arrogant and disrespectful. But they were also correct about its limitations. Murmurs rippled through the chamber, not discord now but something else. The sound of certainty cracking. I have a question, said Counselor Marith, a Cillian whose species communicated primarily through bioluminescence. Ambassador Chin, Your proposal suggests that human legal philosophy would guide the new interpretive framework. But you've admitted that human systems regularly collapse. Why should we trust your approach? Zara unfolded the paper she'd been holding. Because we've learned from our failures. This document is a copy of the Magna Carta, signed on Earth in the year 1215. It was humanity's first major attempt to limit governmental power through written law. She held it up so the chamber's scanners could project it for all to see. The ancient Latin text glowed in the air. This document was flawed, Zara continued. It only applied to nobility. It excluded most of humanity. It was violated within months of being signed. But it established a principle, that law should evolve through agreement, not decree. That even kings could be bound by rules. That flexibility wasn't chaos, it was necessity. She gestured and the projection shifted, showing document after document. Constitutions, treaties, legal reforms spanning 800 years of human history. We've made hundreds of mistakes, Zara said. Sometimes the same mistake multiple times. We've created unjust laws and had to tear them down. We've built systems that collapsed and had to rebuild. But every failure taught us something. Every collapse led to something better. That's not reassuring, Draven said. It should be, Zara replied. Because it means we know how to recover from failure. The Concordance hasn't had a major legal crisis in 11,000 years. That's admirable. But it also means you have no experience with reform. No muscle memory for adaptation. If your perfect system breaks, you won't know how to fix it. And if we adopt your chaos, Thrace said, we'll lose what makes us stable. No, Zara said. You'll gain what makes us resilient. The hybrid system preserves your foundational code. The infinite jurisprudence remains the bedrock. We're just adding a layer that can bend when the bedrock can't. Yavara raised her arms, signaling the vote. All in favor of maintaining current structure? 57 council members signaled assent. All in favor of adopting the hybrid proposal? Kelrith held his breath. 243 council members signaled assent. The chamber's harmonic fields fluctuated wildly as the enormity of the decision settled over everyone present. For the first time in 8,000 years, the Concordance had voted to fundamentally change its legal structure. Motion carries, Yavara announced, her voice steady despite the historical weight of the moment. Ambassador Chin, the Council accepts your proposal. Humanity will guide the creation of our new interpretive court system. Zara Chen, who had manipulated an entire civilization into saving itself, simply nodded. Then we'd better get started, she said. We have 7 months. First contact. 6 months and 23 days after the council vote, Kelrith Voss stood on the observation deck of Concordance Prime's orbital platform, watching something impossible approach. The entity, if it could be called singular, defied every category the infinite jurisprudence had created. It was larger than most moons but seemed to have no mass. It emitted light but generated no heat. It existed in normal space but sensors insisted it was also simultaneously present in 7 other dimensional frameworks. Beside him, Zara Chen reviewed data on her tablet, her expression intense but not frightened. The interpretive court is ready, she said. 3 judges, 1 Valdrath, 1 human, 1 crystalline singer. They've reviewed everything we know about the entity, or entities, or whatever this is. And what's their interpretation? Kelrith asked. That we should forget everything we think we know about first contact protocols. A communication arrived, not through standard channels but as a sensation that every being on the platform felt simultaneously. It wasn't language. It wasn't telepathy. It was something that existed in the space between thought and reality. The entity was trying to communicate. The old system would require us to classify this contact method, Kelrith said, determine which existing protocols apply, submit a formal analysis to the council and wait for a ruling. 7 years minimum. Good thing we don't use the old system anymore, Zara replied. She activated the new interpretive court's emergency session. Within minutes, 3 judges appeared holographically on the platform. Chief Justice Varen of Valdrath, Justice Isabella Okonkwo of Earth, and Justice Chorus of Crystals of the Singer Homeworld. The entity communicates through shared experiential frameworks, Justice Okonkwo announced, her dark eyes bright with excitement. Not words, not images, not even thoughts exactly. It's trying to create common ground by showing us how it perceives reality. That method isn't covered in the infinite jurisprudence, Kelrith said. Which is why we're interpreting, Chief Justice Varen replied. Statute 12.8.9 covers communication through non-standard channels when standard channels prove insufficient. We're ruling that this qualifies. Justice Chorus, what's your assessment? The crystalline singer's response came as harmonics that the translation fields rendered as, the entity seeks resonance, not information exchange. It operates on principles of harmony rather than transaction. I suggest we respond in kind. Motion to establish first contact through experiential resonance rather than linguistic framework, Justice Okonkwo said. Seconded, Varen confirmed. Approved, Chorus sang. The entire ruling had taken 4 minutes. Zara looked at Kelrith. Your turn, Magistrate Prime. You're still the highest legal authority for official contact. Do you accept the court's interpretation? Kelrith felt the weight of 11,000 years of precedent pressing down on him. The old concordance would have demanded certainty, complete analysis, absolute confidence before acting. But the old concordance would have spent 7 years deliberating while an unknown entity waited at their doorstep. I accept the interpretation, Kelrith said. Establish contact using experiential resonance. The crystalline singers moved first, creating harmonic patterns that existed in the same dimensional spaces as the entity. The patterns were beautiful, complex mathematical relationships expressed as music that could only be heard by beings who perceived reality in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The entity responded. The sensation washed over every being on the platform like a wave of recognition. It was showing them how it experienced existence, not as a sequence of moments but as a tapestry where past, present, and future wove together. Not as an individual but as a collective consciousness that had divided itself to explore the galaxy. Not as matter but as patterns of organization that could temporarily coalesce into physical form. It's beautiful, Zara whispered. Over the following hours, contact deepened. The entity learned to create sequential experiences so concordant species could understand. The concordance learned to perceive nonlinear patterns so the entity could share its nature. By the end of the day, basic parameters had been established. The entity, which called itself a name that translated roughly as the distributed harmony, was not invading. It was exploring. It had no concept of territory or conflict. It wanted to learn, to share, to add new patterns to its collective understanding. Under the old system, integrating such a radically different species into concordance law would have been impossible. But the interpretive courts could work with principles rather than precedents, with intent rather than rigid categories. Ambassador Chin, Kelrith said as they watched the first formal exchanges begin, I believe humanity has saved the concordance. No, Zara replied, smiling. The concordance saved itself. You just needed someone to show you that perfection isn't the absence of flaws, it's the ability to recognize and adapt to them. Below them, the impossible entity and the once rigid empire began the slow, messy, beautiful work of building understanding. In the archive of first principles, a new inscription was being carved into crystallized time. The infinite jurisprudence stands eternal, but justice must be living. By vote of the Council of Absolutes 243-57, we embrace change not as corruption of our code, but as its completion. Let it be known that on this day humanity taught us that the truly perfect system is one that knows how to grow. And below that, in smaller letters, a human addition. Also, really read page 2847. It's important.